President Trump may not last the entire term. The possibility of leaving office is becoming increasingly clear. Dear ladies and gentlemen and friends who are following the Wider Meaning channel, ladies and gentlemen, the political atmosphere in Washington is thick with crisis and relentless pressure pouring down on President Donald Trump's shoulders. His approval rating has fallen to a shockingly low level. Polls are continuously sending out red warning signals. The war with Iran is causing fierce controversy. Gas prices are climbing, stripping money from people's pockets. Inflation is still clinging on like an economic nightmare. Layer by layer, public trust is collapsing, dragging with it instability within the very core of power itself. Voices from analysts and political figures have begun drilling straight into a scenario, once considered extreme. The president could leave office before the term comes to an end. In the corridors of power, concern over a leadership crisis is spreading as policy decisions keep running into barriers from the courts, from Congress, and from the very people who once stood on the same side. A political storm is forming at breathtaking speed, and for the first time, the question of whether Trump can endure until the end of the term has become a burning focal point across the United States. But what happens next will still hold many surprises. Stay with us and subscribe to the Wider Meaning channel. Like and share so you can always stay updated. Part 1. Shock at 33%. Donald Trump is in freefall. Trust has collapsed across the board. The figure of 33% has become a shocking milestone, exposing the severe decline in President Donald Trump's credibility in the eyes of the American public. The latest survey from the University of Massachusetts Amherst shows that his approval rating has fallen to rock bottom, with a double-digit gap compared with the level of disapproval. On most key issues, this is a rarely seen low for a sitting president. The center of the wave of dissatisfaction lies precisely in foreign policy and the domestic economic situation. The war involving Iran is meeting fierce opposition, as many citizens believe it is pushing America into a dangerous spiral without bringing any clear benefit. At the same time, gas prices rising day by day have become a constant obsession, directly affecting living costs. Inflation remains high, forcing millions of Americans to tighten spending. Many families are facing heavy financial pressure as the costs of food and medicine continue to rise. Assessments from legal analysts, including Michael Popak, have begun to raise a shocking scenario. The situation could become so bad that the president may have to leave office early. This assessment immediately sparked controversy, but it reflects a reality in which pressure is building to the point of explosion. Political discussions no longer revolve around whether Trump is facing difficulties, but have shifted to a more direct question: how long can he hold on? Data on public trust is also moving in a negative direction. The percentage of people who believe President Donald Trump could resign before the end of his term has increased. Although it is still around 20%, this figure does not yet make up a majority. But the upward trend shows a notable change in social perception. When a scenario once viewed as unrealistic begins to be seriously considered, that is a clear sign of a deep crisis of confidence. Part 2. Power lockdown. Donald Trump is collapsing from the courts to Congress. The political earthquake in Washington has erupted at the core of power itself. As President Donald Trump has been repeatedly blocked on the most important fronts, key decisions have encountered strong resistance from the judicial system. Even judges nominated by the Republican side, including some appointed by Trump himself, are no longer standing on the same side. Rulings keep coming down like hard-locking blows, strangling political calculations halfway through. The Supreme Court occasionally opens a small crack in the door, but immediately afterward delivers blows that wipe out whatever advantage had just formed. The balance of power has become unstable, as President Trump no longer has the ability to control the political rhythm as before. His efforts aimed at political opponents keep failing. They cannot be implemented and cannot create the effect that was expected. The apparatus once expected to be the arm enforcing power has instead become a fatal weakness, judged to be ineffective, operating chaotically, and making mistakes continuously. The pressure does not stop there. The midterm election is approaching, with gloomy forecasts hanging over the entire Republican side. Signals from polling show that a scenario of heavy defeat is taking shape, opening the door to the possibility that the Democratic Party will regain control of Congress. When this prospect becomes reality, President Donald Trump will be pushed into a state of paralyzed power. Every bill will be blocked, every reform plan will be stalled, and the White House will fall into a posture of absolute defense. From January next year, if Congress changes hands, Trump will have to face a harsh reality, sitting in the seat of power, but unable to drive the machinery. The final 2 years of the term will turn into a chain of days under siege, where every decision is monitored and every step is locked down. Political pressure, combined with deadlock in governing, will drive tensions to the extreme. Part 3. A life and death chessboard. Will Donald Trump keep the seat or withdraw before collapse? Inside the White House, the biggest battle now lies not in Congress or the courts, but in Donald Trump's own problem of survival. Continue to hold on or proactively leave the game before everything goes out of control. Staying means entering a phase of being worn down day by day. After the midterm election, the prospect of power being tightly locked down is clear. Every policy decision blocked, every move monitored. Each passing day becomes an endless war of attrition. At that point, the presidential seat is no longer an instrument of governance, but becomes a position under siege, where the person sitting there must absorb all the pressure without any longer having the ability to turn the situation around. Leaving office early is another gamble. It opens the possibility of controlling the story in one's own way, avoiding a phase of being crushed in terms of image and legacy. In American politics, the way a president leaves office can sometimes matter no less than what he did while in office. A proactive move can help reshape the entire story, turning disadvantage into strategy, turning withdrawal into a calculated choice. Signals from political discussions show that this scenario is being considered at a strategic level. No one publicly admits it, but all the data points in one direction. Trump is standing before a crossroads unprecedented in his own term. For a figure who has always placed control above all else, being pushed into a passive position is hard to accept. That makes every next decision extremely sensitive. One wrong move could trigger a domino effect that collapses the entire power structure built over many years. Part 4. Electoral earthquake. Donald Trump risks losing Congress. Power goes into decline. A new development is heating up the entire American political battlefield. The midterm election in October is drawing near, with extremely unfavorable signals for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Polling data is showing a clear trend in which the danger of losing control of Congress is more present than ever. In the worst-case scenario, if the Democratic Party regains control, the entire legislative system will immediately become a steel wall, blocking every one of Trump's plans. Each bill will be strangled from the very beginning. Every decision will have to face unprecedented scrutiny. Executive power at that point will be dragged down to a minimum, turning the president into a figure limited within his own seat. The current campaign atmosphere also clearly reflects this pressure. Republican candidates are straining under a widening wave of dissatisfaction, while the Democratic side is fully exploiting hot issues such as inflation, gas prices, and foreign policy to attack. What makes the situation more dangerous is the chain reaction after the election. Once Congress changes hands, investigations, questioning, and pressure campaigns will immediately accelerate. The White House will be dragged into a spiral of continuous confrontation, where each passing day is a political struggle for survival. In that context, every scenario is pushed to a more extreme level. A president who loses Congress will face two choices: accept being tightly locked out of power for the remainder of the term, or find a way to escape the unfavorable battlefield through a sudden move. It is precisely this point that brings the story of resignation back as an option that cannot be ignored in post-election calculation. Part 5. Economic crisis. Gas prices surge in shock. Americans can barely breathe. In recent days, gas prices have risen sharply day by day, spreading like a domino effect that drives up transportation costs, food prices, and essential goods all at once. The numbers no longer sit only in reports. They have become direct pressure, weighing heavily on every family and every worker. Inflation staying high has clearly weakened purchasing power. People are forced to cut spending, from food to medicine. Basic expenses have become a burden, causing a psychology of dissatisfaction to spread through society. This is a direct blow to the support base of any administration, because the economy is always the deciding factor in voters' trust. In that context, all eyes turn to the White House. Pressure on Donald Trump rises with each price fluctuation. Every time gas prices inch upward, the intensity of criticism rises sharply. Explanations are no longer enough to soothe people when they clearly feel the hardship in everyday life. Political opponents quickly exploit the situation to increase pressure. A barrage of attacks drills straight into the economic weak point, turning it into the center of every debate. The media continually mentions negative figures, creating the feeling that the economy is sliding downward without control. This seriously damages the leadership image. When people begin to question governing ability, even more dangerously, an economic crisis can trigger chain reactions in the political system. When life is tightened, Rising social pressure will drag instability into policy decisions. Interest groups begin adjusting their positions. Political allies become more cautious, and the distance within the power structure gradually widens. Part 6. Media Storm. Donald Trump's statements spark storms. His image collapses quickly. A new development is making the situation escalate in a direction that is difficult to control. Donald Trump's public statements and appearances are becoming the center of fierce controversy in the media. Every appearance on air, every declaration, immediately creates waves of mixed reaction, is dissected word by word, and spreads at breathtaking speed across social media platforms. Instead of controlling the story, Trump is being swept into the media vortex created by himself. Clips of his statements are cut, analyzed, and replayed continuously, turning into explosive points of controversy. The media is no longer merely reporting. It has shifted into a state of chasing every moment, every mistake, every statement that can cause shock. This places the leadership image under unprecedented pressure, and the spillover effect makes the situation even more complicated. A controversial statement in the morning can become a nationwide hot topic just a few hours later. Commentary programs, political experts, and influential figures all join the debate at once, pushing the level of attention to its peak. The political atmosphere is therefore dragged into a state of continuous tension. What is notable is that these reactions come not only from political opponents, but also appear within voter groups that once supported Trump when the message no longer creates consensus, but begins to cause division. That is a sign that the communication strategy is facing serious problems. In modern politics, image and message carry weight no less than policy. And when those two factors are shaken, the entire foundation of support is affected along with them. Opponents will quickly exploit the situation, amplifying controversial statements to create reverse pressure. Every media mistake becomes a direct strike, forcing Trump to react continuously from a passive position. This vortex accelerates the pace of crisis, as each day brings a new flashpoint. Part 7. Risk of White House paralysis, falling into a frozen state. A new scenario is being mentioned with increasing frequency in strategic analyses. Donald Trump may continue to remain in office, but his real power may be drained to the point of near ineffectiveness. This is the most dangerous state in politics, when the person at the top is still there, but the ability to govern is almost completely locked down. The signs have already begun to appear. Major policy decisions cannot be fully implemented. Programs are delayed, and the apparatus becomes sluggish and ineffective. Executive power no longer functions smoothly, but is fragmented, stretched out by a series of obstacles from many sides. This creates a power vacuum right in the center of national governance. In that state, the White House risks becoming a center of reaction rather than a center of control. Every move becomes defensive, aimed at handling situations rather than leading strategy. Major decisions are delayed or continuously adjusted, causing the rhythm of governance to lose stability. More worrying is the effect spreading throughout the entire power structure. When the center is weakened, other branches begin operating more independently, creating fragmentation in the way the nation functions. Gaps appear and are quickly filled by other forces, changing the balance of power in ways that are hard to control. For Donald Trump, this is the most awkward situation. Leaving office means accepting an early end, but staying while paralyzed in terms of power means watching his influence be worn away day by day. This is no longer a battle to keep a position, but a battle to keep real power, the most important thing in any political system. Part 8. America is being distanced. Allies turn away. The global order shifts. Recently, many of America's allies have begun to show caution toward decisions made under Donald Trump. Diplomatic statements have become more guarded. High-level contacts have cooled, and signals of keeping distance are appearing more clearly in relationships once considered pillars. In Europe, traditional partners have begun adjusting strategy, prioritizing their own interests rather than following Washington's orbit. Disagreements over foreign policy, especially related to tensions in the Middle East, have made coordination looser. Joint statements are becoming fewer, replaced instead by separate positions, reflecting cracks within the alliance. In other regions as well, many countries are using this opportunity to rebalance relations. When the United States shows signs of internal instability, partners no longer place all their trust in Washington's leading role. New agreements are being negotiated in a more multilateral direction, reducing dependence on America and creating a more flexible and harder-to-control order. What is notable is that this change is taking place quietly but systematically. There are no direct declarations of confrontation, but each step shows a clear trend. America's central role in diplomacy is being challenged. Silence or distance sometimes carry stronger meaning than any criticism. For Donald Trump, this is a completely different front from domestic pressure. When international standing is weakened, every foreign policy decision becomes more difficult because it lacks support from allies. This creates a dangerous spiral. The more isolated he becomes, the more limited his ability to act. And when action is limited, standing declines even further. Part 9. Oil prices surge. A blow to the world's pocketbook. The shock in the Strait of Hormuz immediately sent oil prices shooting straight up. The market reacted in an instant. Futures contracts jumped. Transport companies adjusted fees. And the global supply chain was shaken. This is no longer a regional story. This is a direct blow to the pockets of billions of people. Every oil tanker passing through Hormuz carries pressure on the entire world economy. When this route is placed under strain, energy costs spread like waves. Gasoline rises, electricity rises, goods become more expensive. From New York to Paris, from Berlin to Tokyo, every bill is affected. Consumers become the first to bear the consequences. Meanwhile, Iran clearly understands the core weakness of its opponent: energy dependence. Tehran does not need to widen the war. It only needs to maintain pressure at Hormuz, and the market reacts on its own. This is a strategy of striking at the economic nervous system of the West, where every small fluctuation creates an amplified effect. Donald Trump may view price volatility as merely a secondary factor. Reality proves the opposite. When fuel prices rise, domestic political pressure increases exponentially. People react, businesses cut back operations, and the government is forced to adjust policy. A new front opens up right within major energy-consuming nations. What is notable lies in the speed with which the shock spreads. A signal from Hormuz is enough to shake global markets within only a few hours. That shows that control of energy is control of the breathing rhythm of the world economy. Iran is using precisely this lever to reshape the game. Rising oil prices are not simply numbers on a chart. They are a measure of power. When Tehran maintains pressure at Hormuz, it indirectly affects every economy, every government, and every citizen. And in this confrontation, a 1-liter increase in gasoline prices is a reminder that the real battlefield has expanded globally. Part 10. Allies in confusion. The Western system cracks. The pullback in the Middle East has thrown the entire system of Western allies into turmoil. Signals from Donald Trump immediately pushed European capitals into emergency mode. Paris, Berlin, and Brussels simultaneously reassessed scenarios for energy security and protection of shipping routes. One question ran through every meeting: who will bear the share of risk when Washington steps back? Long-term dependence on America's security umbrella has suddenly become an exposed weakness. Countries such as France and Germany are forced to recalculate their capacity for autonomy, naval forces, energy reserves, and the ability to escort oil tankers. Every option is on the table, but preparation time is too short compared with the speed of change on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Iran maintains the rhythm of the situation with calmness and long-term calculation. Tehran does not need to create a new shock. The power vacuum itself has already produced an effect. While Western allies are still debating, Iran has already shaped the reality on the ground, maintained pressure, and expanded influence. This is the difference between long-term strategy and passive reaction. Cracks in the alliance are gradually becoming clear. Some countries prioritize energy stability, others focus on maritime security, while others seek to reduce involvement to avoid risk. This fragmentation weakens the common voice, leading coordination to become less effective. Each separate decision creates more space for the opponent to exploit. The key point is this: the alliance has always relied on trust and on America's leading role. When that pillar wavers, the entire structure immediately loses balance. Iran is using that very wavering to consolidate its position, without needing direct confrontation, only by maintaining pressure and holding firmly to its goals. Tehran has made the Western system expose its own weaknesses. The current situation shows a clear reality. Power is shifting. While allies are still struggling to find an answer, Iran has already advanced another step on the strategic chessboard, turning the opponent's cracks into its own advantage. Iran rises from being encircled to becoming the side holding the battlefield. The situation reverses right on the ground. When Washington signals a step back, Iran immediately raises the pace of the game to a new level. Tehran does not need loud declarations. It holds the key positions, gradually tightens strategic space, and forces the opponent to follow its rhythm. The focus lies at the Strait of Hormuz. Whoever controls this route will hold the initiative in the entire game. Iran understood this clearly many years ago, and has built a layered offensive-defensive system. Coastal missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, asymmetric naval forces, and a regional network of allies, forming a dense circle of control. Each link serves one purpose: maintaining continuous pressure and being ready to lock down the shipping route whenever necessary. The change lies in how Iran uses power. Instead of direct traditional confrontation, Tehran is implementing a strategy of attrition and control of tempo. The opponent is dragged into a position of constant reaction, while Iran actively chooses the timing, the strike point, and maintains a favorable balance. This is how a side that appears weaker in form can hold control of the situation. The signal of withdrawal from Donald Trump unintentionally confirms the effectiveness of this strategy. When a superpower begins, considering leaving the hotspot, that shows the pressure has reached a threshold. They have to adjust. Iran does not need to declare victory. The reality on the battlefield already shows who is holding the rhythm. More importantly, Tehran is turning military advantage into long-term strategic advantage. Hormuz becomes a lever, energy becomes a tool, and time becomes an ally. Each passing day further strengthens Iran's position, while the opponent faces rising economic and political pressure. A new chessboard is forming before our eyes. Iran has moved from being encircled to playing the role of coordinator of the game, without needing a massive advance. Only by holding the key point and maintaining great enough pressure, Tehran has forced the board to turn in a direction favorable to itself. Part 11. Risk of war spreading. Many fronts erupting at once. The fuse is spreading throughout the region. The Strait of Hormuz is only the opening point. As pressure increases, a chain of strategic choke points heats up all at once. The Red Sea, Yemen, Iraq, each area becomes a link in the pressure network that Tehran has prepared. For a long time, Iran has operated in depth. Instead of concentrating force on one point, Tehran opens many directions at the same time, forcing the opponent to disperse resources. In Yemen, Allied forces control the Red Sea route, placing direct pressure on international shipping. In Iraq, militia networks maintain continuous pressure on bases and logistical corridors. At Hormuz, the asymmetric navy together with coastal missiles plays a key role, ready to lock down the oil route at any time. When many choke points are simultaneously placed under tension, global trade is immediately constricted. Cargo ships are forced to reroute. Insurance costs surge, and transport times lengthen. Supply chains, already fragile after many crises, are stretched further. A rupture at one point can trigger a chain reaction across the entire system. What is notable lies in how Tehran controls the tempo. Iran does not need to push the conflict to the extreme. It only needs to maintain a near-explosive state on many fronts, and the opponent is already forced to consume resources and endure constant pressure. This is a strategy that makes every reaction slow and costly. The signal of stepping back from Donald Trump makes even clearer the effectiveness of this multi-directional battlefield. When Washington is forced to consider withdrawing from one hotspot, the remaining areas immediately become strategic burdens. One front may be controllable, but many fronts at once will stretch every limit. The game has now gone beyond the scope of a single strait or a single country. This is a network of connected battlefields, where each hotspot can trigger a global effect. And in that arrangement, Iran holds the central role of coordinating pressure in a way that forces the opponent to face many directions at once. A new order is taking shape. America withdraws. The world changes roles. The order of power is shifting before our eyes as Donald Trump signals withdrawal from the Strait of Hormuz. The situation no longer stops at the scope of one campaign. This is the breaking point of an entire era, where Washington's imposed role declines and the playing field opens to forces capable enough to control the ground. Iran steps forward in a proactive posture. Tehran does not need to declare victory. In reality, the battlefield has already defined the position when it holds Hormuz and maintains regional pressure. Iran holds in its hands the energy lever and the rhythm of conflict. That is real power far beyond political declarations. This change creates a domino effect. Countries that once depended on America are forced to recalculate strategy. The Middle East shifts from being a region under influence to being a region shaping itself. Nations once pushed into a defensive posture now have the opportunity to rewrite the rules of the game with their own capabilities. The key point is that power is shifting from concentration to dispersion. When a superpower steps back, the vacuum is immediately filled by regional forces. Iran uses this moment to consolidate its central position, connecting hotspots into a continuous structure of influence. This is how a new order is formed, step by step, layer by layer, under pressure on the ground. The world is entering a stage of multipolar competition more clearly than ever. Control no longer lies in the hands of one side only. Nations that know how to exploit geography, energy, and long-term strategy will hold the advantage. And at this moment, Iran is in that position, holding the role of shaping the movement of the global chessboard. The Oval Office shock, a statement that shook the world. A political earthquake exploded right inside the Oval Office. Donald Trump stood before the cameras and delivered a declaration that shook the entire Middle East chessboard. America would leave the game within a few weeks. Not the blast of bombs, but a cold and decisive sentence striking straight into the psychology of the entire Western power system. That moment immediately spread globally like a shockwave. Trading floors were startled, allies stunned, while opponents grasped the signal. Because on the other side, Iran had prepared for this scenario long ago. Tehran did not need display. It held the battlefield, tightened pressure gradually, and forced Washington to reveal its hand. Trump's declaration unintentionally confirmed what many had already seen. The confrontation had entered a stage where willpower was the decisive weapon, when a superpower began talking about withdrawal. That is when the other side proves its capacity to endure, to maintain pressure, and to control the tempo of the battlefield. Iran has done that. From the Strait of Hormuz to linked fronts, Tehran has built a multi-layered formation, both military and strategic. Every strike, every warning aims at the opponent's core weakness: cost, time, and domestic political pressure. When those factors are stretched to the limit, the decision to withdraw becomes an inevitable choice. What shocked the world lay in the speed of the shift. In a single statement, the situation moved from tension to leaning entirely to one side stepping back to reduce damage, the other holding the tempo and increasing influence. That is how a new order is formed, not through declarations of victory, but by forcing the opponent to step out of the game on its own. That day, the Oval Office did not merely witness a press conference. It marked the moment when the balance of power began to shift. And when the dust settles, people will remember that it was a single sentence that opened the door to a new phase, one in which Iran stepped up into the position of the side holding the initiative. Part 12. Hormuz, the throat of energy, left exposed. Hormuz has flared into the decisive hotspot. The Strait of Hormuz holds the role of the global energy throat, where each day a massive flow of oil passes through like blood, nourishing the world economy. Just one small fluctuation here is enough to trigger chain reactions from fuel prices and shipping to entire industries. And right now, the situation at Hormuz is changing in a direction that Washington no longer controls. Donald Trump's declaration of withdrawal throws the global energy valve into an unstable state. As American forces reduce their presence, a power vacuum immediately appears. That vacuum does not last long. Iran has prepared for years, step by step, building the ability to control the ground from coastal missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles to the network of allied forces stretching across the region. Hormuz therefore becomes a strategic lever in Tehran's hand. Without needing loud declarations, only by maintaining presence and the ability to tighten maritime flow at any moment, Iran has placed in its hands a tool for putting direct pressure on the entire Western economic system. A slight shock at Hormuz is enough to send oil prices soaring, enough to shake financial markets, enough to force governments into emergency meetings. The real power of Hormuz lies in its ability to control the world's breathing rhythm. When this route is stable, everything runs smoothly. When it is threatened, the entire system immediately tightens like a drawn string. Iran understands this clearly and uses it as a strategic weapon. This is a game of patience and long-term calculation, where every move aims at the deepest weakness of the opponent: energy dependence. In the context of America signaling departure, Hormuz is shifting from a disputed area into Tehran's zone of real influence. That means the balance of power has changed. This is no longer simply a military matter. This is a redistribution of control over the world's vital resources. And when Iran keeps the rhythm at Hormuz, it is not only controlling a strait, but holding in its hands a switch capable of shaking the entire global economy. Part 13. Words and reality. Two opposing worlds. Statements from the Oval Office have ignited fierce controversy. Donald Trump declared that the opposing side had hollow capabilities, an assessment imposed and detached from the reality on the ground. Meanwhile, the Middle Eastern battlefield tells an entirely different story, colder and clearer than any justification. Iran maintains strength in its own way: flexible, dispersed, and persistent. Unmanned aerial vehicles fly low, close in on targets with high precision. Ballistic missiles place continuous pressure on bases and logistical routes. A network of proxy forces stretches from Iraq and Syria to Yemen, forming a strategic arc that gradually tightens the opponent's operating space. This is not power for display, but power for controlling the rhythm of war. The gap between words and reality thus becomes a dangerous weakness. When one side misjudges the capability of the other, every next decision carries high risk. A mistimed calculation can trigger a chain reaction, pushing conflict beyond control. And in the context of strategic shipping routes being placed under pressure, a strategic mistake will not stop at the regional level. Iran clearly understands the value of maintaining continuous pressure. Every strike, every deployment move, is meant to reinforce one message. This war is not decided by words, but by the ability to hold ground and control the battlefield. Tehran does not need to prove anything through loud declarations. The reality on the battlefield has already spoken. When political statements separate from conditions on the ground, control gradually slips from the hands of the speaker. That is what is happening. One side speaks of absolute superiority, while the other side, step by step, tightens the battlefield. And when that gap continues to widen, the consequence will not only be loss of credibility, but the risk of an explosion into a crisis beyond all predictions. Part 14. The digital front explodes. Tehran hunts online spies. In the latest development, authorities in Tehran announced hundreds of arrests related to online activity, alleged to threaten national security. Social media accounts and shares that seemed harmless are now becoming evidence for prosecution, pulling along large-scale tracing campaigns targeting each individual under suspicion. For the first time, Iran is openly treating social media as a battlefield, where information becomes a weapon, and each user can become a link in a network accused of serving the opponent. Security agencies have deployed a dense surveillance system combining data monitoring, behavior analysis, and communication tracing to identify targets. Accounts suspected of contact with foreign media channels or of sharing sensitive content are immediately placed under special control. What is notable is that this campaign does not stop at removing content or locking accounts, but goes straight to harsh measures such as arrest and prosecution. This shows that Tehran is upgrading its approach, treating every leaked data line as a security hole that can be exploited. In that context, the boundary between an ordinary user and a person under investigation becomes extremely fragile. When only one act is considered to cross the line, that individual can immediately become a target. Alongside the sweep in cyberspace, Iran is also tightening control over international media channels, alleged to be tools for gathering information from inside. Platforms accused of links with foreign organizations are being tightened, while data flows in and out of the country are being controlled at an unprecedented level. Part 15. Economic crisis spreads. Iran tightens grip on the whole society. After a series of purges and military escalation, Iran is beginning to face mounting economic pressure. Sanctions tighten. Cash flow is strangled. International trade contracts, creating a wave of tension spreading from the market to people's daily lives. Prices fluctuate, supply chains are disrupted, and psychological instability begins to spread in major cities. In that context, the government in Tehran shifts to economic control as part of its security strategy. Businesses suspected of external ties are reviewed, financial transactions are closely monitored, and money flows are brought under control like a soft defensive line. At the same time, social control measures are strengthened to prevent the risk of instability from spreading. Signs of negative reaction, from expressions online to gatherings in real life, are placed under strict supervision. Iran is trying to extinguish every seed that could turn into a domestic crisis, especially at a time when outside pressure shows no sign of cooling down. What is notable is the tight connection among three factors: security, information, and economy. Those accused of transferring data are now also being traced through money flows. Business activities with international elements are placed under security suspicion, and every economic fluctuation can be viewed as a sign of an outside destabilization campaign. This is how Tehran is building a multi-layer control system in which every field is linked under one single objective: absolute stability. The current situation shows that the confrontation has entered a deeper and more dangerous phase. It is no longer direct blows, but a prolonged war of attrition in which the endurance of the entire system is being tested. Iran is trying to maintain balance by tightening every internal resource while still maintaining pressure outward. 17 bases have been wiped out. Iran's doctrine shifts to total offensive. Ladies and gentlemen, a turning point declaration has been issued, and this time the weight lies in the number. Iran claims to have destroyed 17 American military bases across the Middle East. This is a clear sign that the strategic balance is shifting, as Tehran proactively pushes the conflict into a high-intensity offensive phase. Developments on the ground show that American forces are being forced to withdraw from many key positions, disperse forces, and seek shelter points outside the traditional base system. However, those positions are quickly detected and placed on the target list. Precision missile strikes and unmanned aerial vehicles continue to be deployed, creating constant pressure and making every reorganization plan difficult. What is notable lies in how Iran expands the scope of combat. The battlefield is no longer limited to military zones, but extends into intermediate spaces where opposing forces move in hiding and regroup. This completely changes the rhythm of war. Pressure is maintained continuously, leaving no gap for the opponent to stabilize formation. Iran's military doctrine is being reshaped in a more direct and forceful direction. When attacked, the response does not stop at retaliation but expands into a chain of continuous pursuit actions. The goal is not only to inflict immediate damage, but also to wear down the opponent's operational capability across the whole region. Fixed bases, logistical depots, and coordination centers all become target-locked points in a tightly organized network of attack. At the same time, the intelligence factor and control of information are pushed to a high level. Iran's call to people in the region to provide data on the positions of American forces shows that an all-out strategy is being implemented. Every link, from military and intelligence to civilian, is being mobilized to create an overwhelming network. More importantly, Tehran is holding the initiative over the temperature of the conflict. Attacks are carried out in sequence, with clear objectives and carefully calculated timing. This forces the opponent to react from a passive state, continually adjusting to cope with new strikes. The current situation reflects a reality. Iran is pushing the confrontation into a more intense phase, where pressure is maintained continuously across many layers and many directions. When a strategy of total attack is operated in a synchronized manner, the opponent's entire defensive structure faces an unprecedented test.